Welcome, everybody. To you, we are here for a seminar on building a career in team science. It is organized by the Pathways to Promotion Committee of the American Statistical Association Statistical Consulting Section. The section on statistical consulting is a section that tries to foster a community of statistical practitioners across diverse disciplines. It's a very interactive section. A lot of conversation it goes on. It's good to get involved with the section. And one of the key committees of the section is the Pathways to Promotion Committee, which is who is hosting this in conjunction with the San Francisco Bay Area chapter of the American Statistical Association. So our agenda for today is I'm doing the introduction right now. From 105 to 150, we will have presentations. From 150 to 210, there will be panel discussion Q&A. There will be closing remarks after that for about 5 minutes. And then we'll have about 15 minutes of breakout room where you can meet and discuss things with the speakers. Okay, so as we go along, make sure that if you have questions, you can submit them at any time in chat. Those or helping to run the webinar will be looking at those, and we will be compiling those, and we will use those during the Q&A session. Feel free, and then we'll have an open Q&A session after the panel discussion. Okay. What do we mean by team science? Since the webinar is about how to advance in team science. Team science is there's several ways to think about team science. One is that it's collaborative and it's usually cross-disciplinary, where you have a lot of different expertise coming together on a team. And because there's a lot of different expertise, the goal is really to leverage the strengths across the different expertises where you have training in very different fields. What is important about team science is interdependence and joint ownership of any research project. So it's not simply that I'm contributing one little piece to it, but that I'm a true owner and responsible for the project just as much as any other person. Now, in this webinar, we hope that we will address a few things. First, we want to be able to define what is success and promotion for team-based research and how that might vary. What's also important in thinking about promotion and success is how do you develop professionally and what education might you need to be successful in team science. And then we'll also hopefully be discussing what's the difference between industry and academia. Our first speaker is going to be Heidi Spratt. She is professor in the Department of Biostatistics and Data Science at the University of Texas Medical Branch, and we will switch to her now.
I can't share my screen yet, Rob. And blow it up. Blow it up. There we go. Okay, dokie. So my career path, just to let you know where I landed. I did my PhD in a very theoretical mathematical statistics program where I wound up getting a master's degree along the way by signing a piece of paper. Then I got a postdoc in bioinformatics. I was then appointed as an instructor in the non-tenure track, then as an assistant professor, also in the non-tenure track. And then I made my transition to the tenure track when I got promoted to associate professor. I then got tenure, and as of this past September, I was promoted to a full professor. Along the way, I had some of my own individual PI funding As an assistant professor, I was awarded an NCI K25 award, quantitative mentored career development. So for all you biostats or stats folks or quantitative folks, K25s are a great mechanism to start out your career. From that, around the time I was promoted to an associate professor, I had an RO3 award that was sort of an extension of that K25. It was actually specifically for individuals that had Ks only. And then I went through a big giant period without my own PI funding, where I worked on a lot of other people's grants. And currently, just before I got, after I got tenure and before I was promoted to a full professor, I was given an R25 award, which means I run a summer institute for biostatistics for undergrads each year. So it's PI funding, but it's not your typical PI funding where I'm doing methods research. So as an assistant professor, as I was working on my K award, I was on a whole slew of different teams, which meant I saw how various different teams worked. I saw what worked well. I saw what didn't work well. It was also back in 2008, which was roughly the beginning of machine learning days and the boom for them. So I was able to publish first author publications on how to educate a whole bunch of clinicians and basic scientists for best practices and how to run a machine learning algorithm. Something else I'll say as an assistant professor is find your people. Find your other collaborative statisticians, because they're going to be extremely valuable for your well-being and also to help you devise your path in this little winding way that winds up being team science and collaborative biostatistics. So my people wound up being a bunch of people from the ASA Statistical Consulting Section, but my university also has a Clinical and Translational Science Award. And as part of that award over the years, we've had to have a biostatistics, epidemiology, and research design group. So it's a bunch of collaborative biostatisticians from other universities meeting monthly to talk together. That eventually morphed into the Association of Clinical and Translational Science Special Interest Group. Sorry, there's a typo there that should say special. And additionally, at the same time, I became a member of the Association for Clinical and Translational Statisticians, which is just a group of about 150 collaborative biostatisticians working in the realms of clinical and translational research. So a small group of us that love helping each other out as we can. For my associate professor position, I transitioned to tenure track. I was able to do that based on my K awards, bunch of pubs, not as first author, not as senior author, but a bunch of them as middle author, and being able to define my contribution to that, as well as continue teaching 1 to 2 classes per year. For all of my pubs, I was routinely a middle author. I did a lot of the data analysis for it, but I wasn't the primary driver of that research. But to get a tenure track position and be promoted, I still needed first author pubs. So how did I do that? I worked primarily with basic scientists, so I don't do a lot of clinical stuff, or didn't at that time. And so I'd work heavily with a basic scientist where they had more than just 6 mice per treatment. They had a larger design study, and I did a ton of work for the analysis, and I wrote the methods and the results. And then the basic scientist wrote the background and the discussions. So we got a joint first author publication. And I did that a couple times, not one every year, but one every other year is what my track had me do. I also wrote education-oriented papers. So they weren't the typical research paper, but they were based on the concept of, okay, me as a collaborative biostatistician, how do I better educate the people that I'm collaborating with on different stats methods or for them to be a better collaborator. So things like that. How do you educate a specific community, whether it's a disease-oriented community or whether it's a proteomics-oriented community, about best practices and tutorials about those methods. To get promoted, my CV, I had to emphasize the value of my contribution to these various teams. So that came across in my publications. I put after what the publication citation was, what I did for that paper. Did I do study design? Did I just do data analysis? Did I write the methods? Did I write the results? Did I mentor the graduate students? So exactly what contribution I had to that. For tenure then, my institution, we had to separate it from promotion, and we needed to demonstrate value to the university. So I then began doing this by emphasizing my contributions. So how many grants did I help write? How many publications did I participate in? How many graduate students did I help mentor? And this went beyond just serving on their PhD committee, but how many graduate students came to me with stat questions that I then helped them through. And also the value of my service to statistical organizations. So I chaired that bird SIG that I mentioned, and I also was the secretary and am now the president-elect for the Association for Clinical and Translational Statisticians. So that to help demonstrate my value to not only the university, but to the broader collaborative statistics community in general. And so to become a professor, then I bolstered my continued grant support by PI funding for a summer institute in biostatistics and data science, training undergrads. So if you know of any undergrads with an interest in stat, this is a fabulous program to send them to. The NIH LBI supports at least 9 of them around the way. I was also senior author on best practices in statistics, and these came from working with my people that I mentioned several slides ago. So how did I get there? And what did I do in team science? You still need first and senior author pubs, even though you're going to be a collaborative team science person. And this is primarily for a faculty position in academia. You might not need as many as a methods-oriented person, and they might be creative in how you get those senior and first author pubs. They're probably not going to be the methods-driven paper. Some of them might be research-oriented papers, but they don't have to be. They can be education in your field as well. Grant support, we're all doing copious amounts of that, so it doesn't really have to be PI funding, just continued work and adding value to that. If your institution demands you be a PI of something, seek out multi-PI awards where you can add one of the 3 aims being data analytic in some capacity. And also I found that pursuing some sort of workforce development initiatives and activities, such as how can you help others like you succeed? So training for the next generation of collaborative biostatisticians. How can you help educate others to the value of what you do? And what sort of training is needed to encourage others to do what we are doing? So as a postdoc, yes, you can absolutely be a generalist. I was and still advance. As a postdoc, I landed in a core lab and not a consulting biostat lab. I landed in a proteomics lab. And I analyzed a ton of 2-dimensional electrophoresis gels and mass spectrometry data. The value of that is I worked with a ton of different researchers on campus, at least 20 over that 2-year span. So that exposed me to all kinds of different teams. It exposed me to what worked well, what didn't. It exposed me to not being afraid to ask questions anytime I got put on a new team. And it exposed me to being able to educate each new team about what I did and the value of what I did. Is a PhD right for you as a team science person? And the answer is that depends. There are plenty of people involved in team science that just have a master's level degree. And really, it depends on what you want to do with your downstream life. Do you want to be the one leading those questions and informing those questions, coming up with those questions for the research team? If so, a PhD track might be right. If you're happy doing the analysis and just helping guide it and not being the leading force, then a master's degree is perfectly adequate. Do you want to be responsible for your own funding? If so, a PhD route. If you're just happy working with a bunch of other people and you don't want to be one responsible for writing the majority of those grants, a master's route is great. So at many institutions also, if you've been a master's level staff person and you've got 5 plus 10 years experience, many labs will allow you to take more of a lead role. So really it just kind of depends on what you want, how active you want to be, what you want your role to be. But team scientists can be both PhDs and master's level individuals. How do you know if you're ready for promotion? Ask your boss, ask your supervisor. They usually have a good idea. Schedule routine meetings with them, maybe every 6-month checkups just to see, okay, I'd like to be considered for promotion. Here's my stuff. What do I need to do to help get me there? And they will likely tell you, or they'll tell you to talk to somebody else who might know more about that. If you are a faculty person, get feedback from your departmental or school appointment, promotion, tenure committee. Talk with your peers, find your people at other institutions, see what they did when they were ready to go up. How much stuff did they have? What did they accomplish? Most of us are super willing to share and super willing to help get you there. For an academic faculty position, promotion to associate professor is somewhere in the 5 to 8 year span, depending on your institution's timeline. And the promotion from associate professor to full professor is usually somewhere within that 5 to 8 year time span, depending again on your situation and what your university's timeline is. How do we make the team science contributions visible to others, especially those on your teams? So how do you become visible to the team members? Ask to be on meeting agendas regularly. Ask to educate the team about what you do. So your analytic method, they might not know everything about, but ask to educate them about the type of data that goes into it, how to interpret those results, how to make their graphs bigger. Ask to discuss study design and team questions of future interest. So it doesn't just have to be about what's going on now, but help guide additional questions that they might be able to ask with the data they've got at hand. How to work with a new team and make them realize or help them realize the value you add. So speak up at meetings. Don't just sit in the corner. Ask to be introduced to the group and ask questions of them, what they've done in the past, so that you have an understanding of who they are, what type of work they do. Ask them what they'd like to do in the future so that you can be a part of where they're going. Ask them what they'd like to do better and brainstorm ways you can help with that. Again, ask to be added to the agenda so that you have space to interact with all of them so they can see what you add. And also ask to be educated about their particular areas or disease, their technique that is new to you, showing interest in what you've got. So I think that's all I've got, and I am right on time. Stop share. Stop share. There you go.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That was very good. And we are now going to go to Rochelle Trachtenberg. I'm going to just share my slide. Well, Rochelle Trachtenberg, she's professor of neurology in neurology, biostatistics, bioinformatics, and biomathematics and Rehabilitation Medicine at Georgetown University. Rochelle, you're ready. Please take it away.
Okay, so you can see my slide, I'm hoping, because it's not showing me what I'm seeing. So I apologize for not really understanding technology, but that is what happens. Okay, so now for, as they say, something completely different. What I want to talk about is a much more isolated, much less engaged with others approach to forging your own path than Heidi just described. But it can still be effective. If I can advance the slides, it can be effective. Okay, so quickly, I just want to go through my path and whatever I'm going to talk about. The key thing on this slide is I'm going to talk about a lot of concepts and show you figures. You can email me and I will send you my slides, but I just published a preprint and all of the references and figures are explained better on that preprint. So this is a super muddled, crazy picture. But the key things on this picture, apart from the start date, is my first PhD is in cognitive science. So I did not come to statistics willingly or happily at all. And I understand the impetus to publish in educational journals and stuff like that that Heidi talked about. My PhD research project was actually about adult learners. So this is actually the type of research that I did and learned how to do when I got my PhD in cognitive science in 1997. And since then, I've been really interested in curriculum development and the higher ed sort of landscape. It has been a really helpful perspective. So for those of you who don't yet have a PhD and you're thinking about what PhD program to do, you can get into statistics and biostatistics and be an effective team scientist without a PhD in statistics. However, on grant submissions, you don't look like a statistician no matter what if you don't have a degree or some sort of acknowledgement that shows up in your biosketch that you are recognized as an expert in the field. So getting a PhD in statistics isn't the only way in, and you don't even have to have a second PhD, but maybe it helps. After my first PhD was done in 1997, I went to work for the Alzheimer's disease collaborative or cooperative study, and I was at the home where all the data came. And so I was actually hired as a statistician because, as it turned out, my PhD program was very quantitative. I didn't realize that. I didn't speak up in meetings. I was not invited to comment on anything at all, possibly because I was small, young, and female, and all of the boss people were mostly male and tall, actually. But I did actually learn a lot. I came to the project, the space, with a lot of knowledge about brains, because that's what my early training and my PhD were really focused on. But the core sort of challenge in the Alzheimer's disease and associated neurological communities is measurement is a problem. A lot of clinicians don't appreciate that what they are trying to study or trying to make a change in can't really be measured very effectively. And so when I started my master's in public health, which was an emphasis in biometry and biostatistics, I just wanted to learn more about biostatistics because I hadn't learned much about that. I'd been trained as an experimentalist, which I think is very rare now, but that experimental training has been super helpful for me going forward. And then learning about what biostatisticians do in my MPH program was also really helpful. And that 5 years was effectively a postdoc for me to learn about clinical trial design and biostatistic applications, and to recognize that there are a lot of measurement challenges that exist when you don't have cancer or a diagnosis that is unambiguous and everyone agrees on it. So in that period, that 5-year period, I published 14 papers, and on 9 of them, I was the first author. Much of the first authored work, all of my first authored work was based on the fact that someone would come to me and say, I need you to do this analysis. And I would say, why do you want ANOVA since you have only one group? Or why are you looking for something with a continuous outcome when you only are using, ordinal or not even that nominal data? And they would say, well, that's just what I've always done or whatever. And as we discuss it, as Heidi was saying, we discuss their hopes and dreams for this analysis. We would discover that they did not know what more than placebo meant. They did not know what the instrument's error range was. So they couldn't tell what would be more than expected in any of the measurements. So those 9 papers were all methodological. And as I became a known collaborator, some people actively avoided participating with me, but the ones who were more interested in a more rigorous or more methodological sort of project, they invited me to be the second author. So I want to advocate for using second authorship as a, if you can't be the first author, you're certainly not going to be the last author early in your career. You could be the second author in a paper if you organize that ahead of time. And second author is way better than middle of the road. Absolutely shows up. And you would be on par or on track to get what would be considered co-first authorship if you have a generous first author, depending on where they are in their career. So after I finished that, I came to Georgetown University, which is in Washington, D.C. I was the only consulting statistician for the School of Medicine for 4 years or whatever it was, until I got my K. My K award was a K01, not a K25. So the K01 award, I had to come up with a research project. I was the driver of the research project, and I also had to have something that I was going to learn more about. I chose latent variable modeling because it's such a critical component to measurement generally, and also to measurement in things where it's hard to measure things like neurology. So I had my K award. When you're on a K award, it's fantastic. 75% of your salary and time must be dedicated to that project. And no one can put you on a grant if you are not a co-PI. It is a fantastic mechanism if you can come up with a research project like that. And at that time, Georgetown joined its CTSA. And because I was not going to be a PI on it, I was not eligible to participate in the CTSA. That, I believe, was a super help for me, because the CTSAs, in my opinion, are underfunded and people and overpromise. So it makes it a very challenging work environment for you to move yourself forward down your path to promotion or whatever you consider success when you are struggling to help other people move down their paths. It's a unique attribute for biostatisticians in an academic setting that everyone else is only concerned with their career, and you must also be concerned with their career while you are also struggling to make your career happen. So all of the things that Heidi described are absolutely true. The frustrating thing is the people you're working with, they do not have that concern. So some of them aren't really motivated to help you get your path, get you further down your path. So you do need to be judicious about people that you find to work with. If you can find groups of peeps like Heidi did, or make groups of peeps like Heidi did, that's fantastic. Now, I did my K award around training in latent variable modeling, and it actually ended up being the case that I needed 4 courses in addition to the courses I was already going to take to earn the PhD in that field. So I had planned a huge amount of training, and if I took 4 additional courses, I would get a PhD, which shows up on your bio sketch. So even though the PhD is in measurement and statistics and evaluation, as soon as I became a candidate for that degree, and NIH reviewers were like, oh, she's an expert in statistics, we can definitely trust her with this job, even though I had been doing it for 10 or 15 years at that point. So I finished that PhD, and in getting that PhD, I actually completed something called a doctoral level certificate that the University of Maryland had. I chose gerontology because it mixed this problem with measurement and my prior work in brain aging and Alzheimer's disease. Finished that doctoral certificate by publishing 3 first author peer-reviewed papers showing how specific methodologies in latent variable modeling work particularly well in measuring changes that are associated with brain aging. So that was a huge amount of work. It was all self-driven. I was given maybe 2 opportunities where people said, I guess Rochelle can do that. But most of it was me finding an external resource and striving towards that resource. If I want to be listed as an expert on a grant or a credible PI, I need to have this in my CV and it has to show up on my biosketch. It can't be I attended this training or I went to that workshop. It's got to actually be visible on the biosketch. And eventually, after a while, I joined the tenure track. When I got my K Award in 2006, I was an assistant professor. Then I got associate professor and award of tenure in 2012, which was the first opportunity at Georgetown University to apply to get tenure if you were a team scientist. And then in 2017, I was promoted to full professor, and that's where I remain. And, you can see here that the way I publish has shifted. The publication record reflects your expertise, and that is an argument that you must make to a promotion committee, to the next person you want to work for, or to grant reviewers. Yeah. Okay. So how can you do that in the team science venue? NIH defines translational research in such a way as to make the clinician who doesn't necessarily have training in science the star of the show. So they're very enthusiastic about translational research that is directed by clinicians and carried out by others that the clinician manage. But when you look at the NIH definitions of translational research, which is more of a paradigm, it is the process of turning observations into interventions. So the NIH definition is really all about clinical processes, but this process that they are encouraging the clinician to run is science. So when you look at definitions of translational science, you see that the intellectual and practical activity of changing results into a usable or actionable form is actually something that anyone with technical training in statistics is definitely going to be able to do. So you can document your successes in science, promoting science like Heidi did, either by helping other people appreciate the importance of statistics in science, or new methods that promote stronger science, or just new methods that make science doable. You can start to document those successes. And if you do that, you might be turning yourself into a translational scientist, not a translational researcher. So this is a typical model for the clinical and translational science continuum. There are 5 places where different kinds of science happen. Typically, our methodological advances are essentially basic science. You say, I think this theory shows that this estimator can be improved, and you publish a very niche result like that, just like somebody coming up with a new mouse knockout model or something like that. And then it's up to someone else to move your research up the continuum. So this is the augmented clinical translational science continuum that the reference on the first page is about. And this shows, here are the stages for the different types of science. And these translational opportunities, back translation, lateral translation, and then translational methodology, those are all opportunities that any one of you can take advantage of and become characterized as a translational scientist. So one way that if you aren't able to add an aim that's along the dimensions of the straight science, you can promote the alignment of outcomes along a translational continuum. So someone wants to do a study at one level, you can say, let's add a sub-aim where we're going to be moving forward so that whatever we get as a result will be translatable by the next person up the stage or back translation. Lateral translation is at the opposite end of a dynamic from knowledge implementation or knowledge translation. This is fully explained in my paper if you are interested. I believe all translational science Science, not research, is lateral, because what you are doing as the first author or the driver of this kind of research is changing results obtained from systematic study into an usable or actionable form. And you can do that by finding information from other, I'm going to go over it, just want to announce that right now. You can use that translational approach to drive your own biosketch. And I wanted to add a comment about success. So I wouldn't limit myself, and I didn't limit myself to just what my institution told me was required for success, because as I mentioned, they didn't even allow team scientists to apply for promotion until 2011. Instead, I looked to external sources for opportunities to achieve successes. And one of those is the ASA PSTAT application, or just the guidelines. So when you think about evidence that your work as an applied statistician is of high quality, there are a lot of different ways to do that. You don't just do it with publications or grants, but as Heidi said, by making contributions to your community and changing the way people think about science and the role of statistics in science. So even one extra paper per year can support your claims of expertise and success. And that way you can document your shift from supporting scientist to translational scientist.
Thank you, Rochelle. That was very good. There was a request that you put a link to your paper in the chat. So if you could do that as we're proceeding. The next speaker is Rochelle Liu from Illumis, and she will be the next to talk. Take it away, Rochelle.
Do you want me to share my slides, or do you want to share slides from your side?
Go ahead and share.
All right. Let me know if you guys can see it.
You're visible.
All right, and let me just quickly, how to switch it. Are we going here? There we go. All right, thank you so much, everybody. It's great to see everyone here. First of all, I want to thank the P2P committee of the ASA Statistical Consulting Section for inviting us. This is really a very impressive group. And also, I want to apologize for my voice, because I've been still recovering from a cold that I had over the weekend. So you may see me start coughing along the way. But it's really great to be here and share some of my thoughts on how to build a successful career in team science, especially from the biopharm biotech industry perspective. Here is 3 things, pretty much what I wanted to talk about in my presentation, and I'm gonna take a different style, different approach from Heidi and Rochelle just presented, because I didn't prepare those fancy slides, but I felt like when I heard how the first 2 speakers talk about their very successful career path, I thought I should also at least give you a little bit background about who I am and how I got here. So I got my PhD from UC Davis, and basically in statistics, and with the emphasis in biostatistics. And back then, I was actually contemplating if, whether or not at first to get a PhD. I can talk about a little bit more about how I reached my decision to continue pursue my PhD. And then I have always been working in industry. Basically, I switched from platform company, which is mostly providing tools for high throughput sequencing for genomic data, or microarray for high throughput genomic data, and also going to clinical diagnostic company, and then then I transitioned to the biopharmaceutical industry. I currently am the vice president of biostatistics and statistical programming at Loomis, and Loomis is a pre-IPO private company in the San Francisco Bay Area. So I'm gonna just maybe the three things I would like to cover in my presentation. The first one is maybe to give a little bit more flavor about how does it look like to work in industry? What are the different career paths? And also, how does the collaboration looks like in industry? Because I thought Heidi and Rochelle did a really fantastic job laying out what that looks like in their institution, in academia, but this might look a little bit different in industry. And also, I want to talk about a little bit about, in industry, it's not all about project work. It's not all about making profit. It's also about innovation as well. So I want to also highlight that. Some of the key things that I think would be critical to be successful in a team science industry. And the three things I listed here, communication, ownership, and continuous learning, may not be new to you at all, but I will, again, add a little bit flavor and elaborate a little bit about what that looks like and give you some example from industry. For career promotion, and that's really the key things why we are here today. I think for career growth and advancement in industry, it may also kind of have a different more defined or less defined. It's really up to you to decide. But I want to give you some examples and also share a little bit tips and tricks that I think was helpful for my own career advancement. So what are the different career paths for industry statistician? Basically for industry statistician, I think I've been through 3 different industry small sessions or areas within the biotech, biopharma industry. I think there are basically 3 bigger categories. One is really you work on a study or a project. You either serve as a supporting statistician, collaborating with scientists, clinicians, clinical operation folks, or you be the lead on a particular project or a study. Another career track is basically, you focus on methodology development and also work with the product statistician to make sure the method you and your team develop could be applied very properly. And also you would be the gatekeeper to make sure the right and proper statistical methodology and principles are applied, tailored for your particular purpose and study objectives. So I know currently some of the bigger companies, they all have statistical center of excellence where they hire, mostly PhD statistician, but sometimes also master statistician as well, mostly as a supporting role. But their own main job is really to develop, the proper statistical methodology and application to be used for project statistician. So that's really the group of people who I would see as a, more like a, will function more similarly to academic statistician, but working in an industry environment. And the last category is really about management. It's like people management. I would say, honestly, even if you are sitting in a people management role, most of the time it is very healthy, and for your own long-term career growth, it is critical to also keep updated with what's latest, with the statistics, with the methodology, with the new trend, what are the new policies. So those are, basically really important to still be somewhat hands-on on the technical side of things. In terms of application areas, one of the big application area is really in the clinical trial setting. And this is, I think, a lot of biopharma and biotech statistician works on designing clinical trial sample size, making sure the endpoints are defined and calculated correctly before you and apply the right statistical principles. handling missing data, pre-specification, and also educate your cross-functional teammates why it is really bad to do post hoc analysis, and also, don't cherry pick those kind of things, right? I mean, that's really important in a team science environment, especially your collaborators on the same trial team or study team. They are sometimes really demanding, like clinicians, clinical operation folks, sometimes even, in regulatory affairs who interact with FDA and other regulatory agencies. So this is a big category for statisticians, have a lot of, I would say, depth and opportunities for you to take on. And it is a good entry point as well for new grads or early career industry statistician to learn, and not only for basically not only for your early career, but also to grow your career for your entire industry life. Another category is the translational sciences. It's more like between, I would say, between clinical trials and research. This is especially important for biomarker-driven personalized medicine, targeted therapeutics development in this field. A lot of biomarker research, basically it stays, and some of you also have this kind of experiences. The biomarker benefit does not always translate to clinical benefit. And that's where the translational piece comes in. As a statistician, you need to understand the benefit or the delta that is identified by a certain biomarker, and also help your team to design the right study experiment to answer a question whether or not it can translate into clinical benefit in the disease area. So that's the second piece. Outcome research is really about kind of health outcome, and it's more towards the downstream. It's related to health outcome policy. Sometimes it's also about reimbursement, because as we all know, in United States, the healthcare is a big business. Like it or not, that's the reality we're facing. So the outcome research oftentimes is highly tied and related and associated with a lot of insurance policy and reimbursement decision discussions, and that's where it require you as a statistician to be able to translate the clinical benefit that you observe and see from the clinical trial into a real world setting. The fourth one, high throughput computing, mostly is about omics, imaging, and some of them you may see a lot of applications using AI and machine learning in the healthcare setting, especially for imaging. But for AI machine learning, there's also other applications in industry, for example, projection of clinical trial enrollment, or projection, or for some of the endpoints, and also projection of the missing data, random not at random. Those kind of things are some of the most seen AI machine learning application areas in recent years. So let me speed up a little bit because I see I only have 4 minutes. So collaborative statistician working in industry obviously have to work, work in collaboration with a lot of different people from a lot of different backgrounds. And you are very familiar with, and the previous speaker already spoke about the science, working with scientists, clinicians, and project management, some of the business development people, because, in industry, our main focus is to develop a product. But another thing I want to also highlight is in industry, you will have opportunities to collaborate with the, academia and research consortium statisticians as well, and sometimes with the FDA or similar government agency as well. For example, for cancer big consortium, sometimes in the company, we would like to collaborate with the research consortium for the samples they have, because they have been keeping the cancer sample from cancer patients for like 20, 30 years. They have the long-term follow-up clinical data on those patients, and they have to sample it themselves. So as a company, if our product is developed based on those samples, then we would really love to collaborate with the consortium and basically to be able to use their samples and their clinical outcome data with those long-term 10, 20 years survival outcome, for example. But also basically collaborate for good research, right? And the good research would need statisticians working with physicians to come up with the right questions to answer, and design the right study, right sample size, stratification, and controls, and all of that. So in this kind of scenario, in industry side, we will have there's a collaboration between project statistician and methodological statistician, working with the other statistician on the other side from the research consortium or academia. So that oftentimes would result in very high quality publications as well. So I just want to also give that flavor, because that's actually something that would be really fun. And I see more industry, more companies are doing this to result into very high quality research and eventually great product for patients. Some of the key things that I think are important for success in team science in industry, I listed all of them here, but I really want to highlight two things. One is the ownership. So ownership means basically, when you collaborate in a team science, statisticians are often seen as a supporting role, even in industry. I think one of things, we would love to improve and be seen as more of a partner type of role is to take more ownership, which means, basically take it through the end and make sure our partner's question is being answered and make sure we are all reached to a mutually agreement at the end. Don't say, hey, I've done my work, this is it, take it from here. So that's not full ownership. Ownership means see it completely through. And another one is continuous learning and to stay curious. We are in an environment, changes are pretty much happening every day, not only the content, but also kind of the landscape and dynamic. So make sure you build the right foundation for your statistic work. Make sure you also keep an eye out and be able to adapt. And I think that's some of the things that I listed in the end is really kind of anticipate change and be prepared. But that really means you need to, build the right foundation and be willing to adapt. And to me, changes are actually opportunities. They're not a bad thing. And I want to also call out the last piece is ASA is actually a great professional community for you to build the connections, to build the right foundation, and also to get great information to be able to adapt for the future. So I'm going to stop here and maybe we can save some of the discussion in the Q&A session. But thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you very much, Rusha. I'm going to so we will move on now to the Q&A session. If you have questions, feel free to add them to the chat. We've been keeping track of questions a little, and I won't direct them at any one person unless it's clear that it's directed towards one person. So I'll start with the question that's at the top, which one of the questions somebody had is, what are the key contributions that statisticians are positioned to make in clinical translational studies where statistical analysis is not a focus?
So I'll chime in some of if it's not statistical analysis, because as a team science member, you're usually exposed to multiple teams. You can help with thoughts on patient recruitment, thoughts on patient inclusion, exclusion criteria. So you can chime in on things to improve the study even before patients become enrolled. You can help keeping things on track and ensuring randomization is going appropriately. You can also help with writing up what's been done. So just because it's not exactly stat related doesn't mean you can't contribute in some other capacity using the skills and things you've seen from other teams.
So I'll add to that. There's a new sort of type of paper that wasn't really possible a decade ago called a protocol paper. Now, some people will write a protocol paper and just explain what they're going to do. If you are registering your clinical trial with the at clinicaltrials.gov, which you must do now pretty much, the protocol is just sort of what you did. But for my path, I try to make sure that there's an innovation in the protocol. Why does anyone want to read about my protocol? It's not because it's, cancer trial number 17. It's because I infused, for example, the FDA's enrichment protocol from 2010 into the recruitment scheme. So now I have a peer-reviewed publication, and it's about my specific shiny brain helping the recruitment and retention actually have a higher likelihood of recruiting people who are going to show an effect if there is one. So protocol papers are a way where it's not strictly statistical, but you are the expert who knows how the numbers need to add up and sort of where the error is going to come into play, so that when you design a protocol, it may not be some special new method that you developed, but the articulation of why it's different or interesting actually will help other people be better scientists. That's really an important contribution that you can make.
Rochelle, do you have anything to add?
No, I think they both cover really well. So we can move to the next.
So the next question, I'm going to try to combine two questions because they're related. And the next question is really about how to think about transitioning, both from being a student to a postdoc and from postdoc to the next thing. What advice do you have about how to think about how to best structure that transition, and what should you be thinking about and doing to enable that transition? Rochelle, do you want to take that?
Sure. So I think an important sort of point from my talk, if you got anything out of it at all, is that you are in charge of your own professional narrative. So, for example, if your institution, like mine doesn't have an avenue for non-tenure track participants or for team science participants to advance, then you need to look elsewhere, like a nearby university. If they have a path to promotion for people who are doing team science, then you can take their matrix and use it to determine if you are on the right path to looking like the next level anywhere. So you don't have to utilize your own institution or the place where you are, especially if you're a postdoc or a student. The place where you're going right now, or the place where you are right now, isn't necessarily the place where you're going to end up. So you want to start getting into the habit of looking elsewhere. And like I brought up the ASA PSTAT designation, you can't apply for that until you've been a practitioner for 5 years. But that doesn't mean that 5 years from now, you should go and look to see what you should be doing. So you want to think ahead a few years at least and look for job descriptions, role descriptions, and other things that exist. Microsoft, Google, and the US government, for example, they're so big that they have to describe their jobs really, really carefully and what it looks like to advance from one level to the next. Do you need a PhD to get to the next level? Or is it some amount of training, some amount of education, and some amount of experience? So when you're thinking about transition, don't wait till you're ready to transition yourself, but start making a plan. And my advice is look around, look at the entire landscape for ideas about How do I know if I'm prepared to transition, or am I on the right path to look like I'm on the road to transition? It's really important to remember it doesn't actually matter what you think about yourself or your skill set. If you think you or your skill set are too low or too high, those are not the important things. What's important is, what does it look like on paper? Because people who are deciding to interview you or promote you are not going to meet with you. They're going to look at you on paper. So you need to make sure, I think Heidi said, you need to make your achievements, your contributions visible. They have to be sort of recognizable to the people who are going to be making decisions based on your representation of yourself.
And so I'll add, if you're a current student thinking of pursuing a postdoc, potentially seek out a postdoc that will allow you to expand in areas you're weak, especially if you want a future faculty position and you don't really have many publications from your graduate career. Seek out a postdoc that will let you publish. If you have zero teaching experience, but you know a faculty position is probably going to want some amount of teaching experience, seek out a postdoc that will allow you to gain that experience. So identify where your gaps are in your CV that you think are real gaps for a faculty position, and seek out some sort of postdoc or additional training that can help you fill those gaps. And for postdoc to faculty, figure out what you like. Do you hate teaching? Do you want to go to a research intensive school? Do you like teaching undergrads? Do you want to make sure you land at an institution where you get to do that? Because I'm at an academic medical center. We don't have undergrads, so my teaching load is small, and I teach only a few graduate students a year. So figure out what you like and try to seek out opportunities that will allow you to do the things you like and a little less of the things that you're just like, no.
I think for industry, I'll just share something really worked for me, is to get a mentor. And I think getting a mentor, that's probably also applied to academia or research setting as well. But I think getting a mentor, and you may not only get one, you can, ask for a few. It's really to understand, kind of what's the reality, right? That's a reality check. Sometimes I think for industry jobs right now, we use LinkedIn often, either to hire or to apply jobs. You kind of can see what are the job requirements are with certain job titles, so you kind of can get some idea. So that would be my actually step number 0, to get a sense if you're thinking about either transition or stay in your current track. But another thing is getting a mentor is really to build a reality check, but also to build some relationship, like either people working in your current industry or people working in adjacent industry or in the area you're thinking to transition to. It may not be really what you think it is, right? I mean, it is really important to get that person feedback, and also ask that person, sometimes the mentor, what are the areas of improvement you can make in his or her eyes. So sometimes it's about getting 360 feedback around yourself, getting somebody more senior than you, and also ask for their advice. How did they get there from where they were before? So my advice is just very simple: get a mentor.
So I actually have some advice on how to get a mentor. I really want to encourage people who want to get a mentor to research the people they want to invite to be their mentor. You want to find a person who's had a kind of career that you want, or does the kind of thing that you want to do. Because I get requests to be a mentor that say, "Dear blank, I admire your work. Can you help me get typo in your industry? Sincerely, high school student number 6 or graduate student number 6." So these are things where I say, I wish you had thought a little bit about this request before you sent it to me, because now I'm angry. I'm not going to help you at all. So you want to do some work before you ask someone to help, asking them a specific question like, how did you get where you got, obviously is going to get you 28 minutes that you didn't want to hear about from me. But so you want to have a more focused question than that for the person you're asking for advice from.
Yeah. And also like start with like, people you probably already meet at the conference, like, for example, ASA. If you attend this seminar, for example, if you're online right now, and if you like one of us, then when you reach out, just say, hey, I attended your seminar and this is something I'm really interested to learn more, something like that, right? I mean, again, to Rochelle's point, do your research.
So I want to follow up. Are there specific things with regard to team science that a student should be thinking about trying to do, in thinking about they want to transition to a postdoc? What are the specific things, like should I be trying to develop a K award?
So it took me 3 or 4 years to write my K award, and I had a mentor who was a neurologist. But I had to explain to each of the people who were going to be you actually have to identify a mentor for a K, and I had multiple ones. One who was a clinical trial expert, one who was a measurement expert, and one who was an applied statistics expert, actually. So the writing your K, it's not something you're going to do in a summer. I had to figure out, and if you want, ping me in the chat or whatever, I will send you the slide deck on what is a K01. It's not like, hey, I'm really interested in machine learning, so I want to get training in that. Love applicant number 6. You really have to think much more deeply and know there's a gap and I want to fill it, and this training will help me fill that gap. So that's a huge amount of background that you need to know in order to have identified the small little bit of knowledge that you need to get trained in. Now, latent variable modeling obviously is not small, and you can get a whole PhD in it if you want. But the idea that a K award, if that's what you want, you really do need to build a case for getting that award. Getting grants is really hard, but you really need to start thinking about arguments for that support. If you're a pre-doc and you want a postdoctoral grant, getting an NIH postdoctoral grant is an amazing stepping stone to further NIH funding. If you're pre-doctoral, getting a pre-doctoral NIH grant is an amazing stepping stone to funding. So you already have to do that research. You already have to do that work. Thinking about where you're going next, you must do that to apply for a pre-doctoral grant and a postdoctoral grant, and then any other grant you get after that.
I
Okay.
was just going to add, many institutions also have groups for K2R transition or how to write a K. So junior faculty groups on specifically for you're interested in writing a K and sort of forming a peer group for others in that same pool. So if that's a path you might be interested in, seek out a university with those sorts of resources. They are extremely helpful for just understanding what content goes into a K award versus an R or something different.
So one of the questions in the chat is asking about job requirements, and what my interpretation is, you look at a job description like on LinkedIn, it has a lot of requirements for what is needed. How can you tell which of those are the ones that you really need to worry about? And what point do you know that it's worthwhile applying to the job?
Is it specific to industry jobs or academic jobs?
It did not say.
So I can just start with my 2 cents here. I think it's really important to, it's a whole package, right? To be honest, as a hiring manager, I actually do not ever anticipate any applicant would meet all the requirements listed in the job. But, basically sometimes you may be maybe halfway there, and you may be, 1/3 way there. But it's okay, because I think it's more about where you think you are comparing to the job posting, and also do you think it is it basically reachable to that level. Sometimes when you see a job posting, they have flexibility in terms of the job titles. For example, this is a director title, but you may not meet the minimum number of years requirements of working in such role. Then we could sometimes have a little bit flexibility and lower to associate director, that kind of thing. That happens all the time. But the thing is more about whether or not you think this is something you're truly interested in and would like to continue to grow in this pathway. I think that's really number one. And then look at what you have done, and also what you have in your pipeline. How close it is, and how relevant it is, and then do your best. When you reach out or apply, your cover letter. Making sure it is really well, explained and showcase yourself. So that would be my 2 cents advice.
Rochelle, do you have more to add, or Heidi? Okay, so we are now going to move on to closing remarks, and I'll start with Heidi. Any closing remarks?
I know, because I didn't realize these were ours. Basically, figure out what you want to find your people, ask lots of questions. Team science can be a really rewarding career. You just have to figure out how to lay the framework out and show others that my value is just as much as the clinician or the basic scientist on the study.
Rochelle?
Yeah, I would, unfortunately, just given my history, I would advocate for not trusting or entrusting your promotions to others. I would advise you to be proactive and concrete. And if you are fortunate enough to have a good mentor, that's fantastic. But this should not be about luck. This should not be about people you bump into at Starbucks or whatever on campus. I hope that all of you are able to create a paradigm for yourselves that enables you to define success for yourself and meet those milestones that you have set for yourself. You don't have to come up with them de novo. You can get them from the environment. So I want to encourage you to be self-sufficient and self-directed. You can use these concrete milestones that are in the environment, but I encourage you to use them.
Final thought?
All right. I think for me, it's about you're your own brand. And basically, you are the one really is responsible to build your own career, no matter it is lateral or vertical career advancement. So don't be shy. And sometimes it takes time to figure out what you really like, what you really enjoy. But the more you try, at least you can know what you don't like. So that's really, be your own brand, and don't be shy. That would be my final thoughts.
Although it's okay if you are shy. It's okay.
Yeah, that's true. A lot of statisticians are introvert, and sometimes
oh my God,
it's yeah.
It's really hard to network. So don't feel like you have to engage with humans.
Exactly.
You can still build a very effective and successful career with minimal human contact.
Okay, we're going to now go to the breakout rooms. Let's thank the speakers before we do that. And I'm going to open up all the rooms. There's one breakout room for each of the speakers.